One of the more infamous elements of Second World War history are the Waffen-SS foreign legions, as seeing foreign troops fighting for a cause which seems nationalistic and undoubtedly xenophobic captures the imaginations of many. So, the topic of British prisoners of war being recruited into the SS is fascinating. This unit of the Waffen-SS was known as the British Free Corps. This leads to some burning questions. How successful was this unique squad in recruiting nationalistic, tea-sipping gentlemen? How much combat did they see? And of course, how was this group formed and managed? The British Free Corps was a unit of the Waffen-SS during the Second World War. The unit consisted of British prisoners of war, or POWs, who had been recruited by the Nazis. There was also some South Africans, supposedly 5 in total, who served in the Waffen-SS during this infamous unit, among other Commonwealth nations. The unit was originally known as the Legion of St. George. The idea for the British Free Corps came from a man called John Amery, a British man who dabbled in fascist ideology. He was son of the serving British Secretary of State for India, Leo Amery. John Amery knew that there was fascist sentiment within Britain, as there were inactive members of the British Union of Fascists during the 1930s, founded by Oswald Mosley. Amery set to work by suggesting that the Germans consider forming a British anti-Bolshevik legion, as he coined it. Adolf Hitler seemed impressed by Amery, allowed him to remain in Germany as a guest to make a series of pro-German propaganda radio broadcasts to Britain, attempting to appeal to the British people to join the war on communism. The lack of any real success from this endeavour disheartened Amery, until he encountered Jacques Doriot, which was during a visit to France in January 1943. Doriot was part of the LVF, or Légion des Volontaires Français, a French volunteer force fighting alongside the Germans on the Eastern Front. The LVF thrived from an undeniable anti-communist sentiment, which Amery believed many Britons could sympathise with. Consequently, Amery rekindled his idea of a British unit and aimed to recruit around 100 men for propaganda, which could attract additional members from British prisoners of war camps. Amery's first recruiting drive for what was initially to be called the British Legion of St. George took him to Saint-Denis POW camp outside Paris. Amery addressed between 40 and 50 inmates from British Commonwealth countries and handed out recruiting material. This first effort at recruitment was a complete failure, however. He was cheered away by the crowd after failing to answer questions presented to him by a British official named Wilfred Brinkman. These questions included: what will happen by chance if the Legion finds itself fighting against British soldiers? What will be his status if he is taken prisoner? And what will happen to him after the war? These questions resulted in an embarrassing loss for Amery, as he couldn't provide any adequate answers, leading to this initial recruitment drive unravelling into a mass disturbance within the camp. However, Amery persisted, and he wouldn't let these defeats deter him. He tried out a new strategy based on individual interviews, most likely to weed out the more shy fascists among British POWs. The targeted camp would be saturated with propaganda 2 to 3 days before Amery's interviews. The propaganda included the distribution of Amery's manifesto, John Amery Speaks, and the posting of his proclamation in every hut. His drive for recruits found 2 men, of only one, Kenneth Berry, joined what was later called the BFC. Amery's interest in the Legion started to dwindle after these, unsurprisingly, poor results. He made other visits to civilian internment camps and POW camps, but his campaign was seemingly a failure. Soon, Amery's interest in this endeavour came to an end, and he was promptly relieved of any real responsibility, while German command, on the other hand, focused even more on forming an official British unit. As for Amery's fate, he was tried for high treason and hung in November 1945 in London, with the trial only lasting a measly 8 minutes. Now under German command, they believed they could form a holiday camp to weed out likely recruits. 2 of these holiday camps were set up, being the Special Detachment 999 and 517. English-speaking guards were used to obtain info on British soldiers. Soon, 200 POWs arrived in the camp, and pro-Nazi men worked the crowd, seeking ex-British Union of Fascist members or other ex-fascist group members, as well as finding out attitudes about the communists among the camp. This treatment started to worry many of the POWs, who rightly demanded to be sent back to their camps, believing that they were under observation. To try and calm this, Brigadier Leonard Parrington inspected the facilities, incorrectly reporting it was indeed a holiday camp and that the POWs should not worry. This succeeded in calming the POWs. However, this recruiting effort still only gained one confirmed recruit, being Alfred Vivian Mitchin. After the failure of these enticing tactics within the holiday camps, they started to take in newly captured prisoners at a new camp in Lukenwald. The used methods in this camp included blackmail, intimidation, and threats to coerce prisoners into joining. Eventually, a handful of men were recruited for various reasons, and command of the unit was delegated to SS Hauptsturmführer Johannes Rogenfeld, who was appointed commander of the British Free Corps. He had lived in America prior to the war and spoke fluent English. The administration of the unit was also shared with SS Hauptsturmführer Hans Werner Ropke. As for the formation of the group, the name had to be discussed. The Legion of St. George was rejected for sounding too religious, and the British Legion was also not acceptable since it was in use by a UK World War I veterans group. Eventually, it was decided to be named the British Free Corps, or BFC. That settled, Ropke moved on to the purpose of the unit. All the current members told Ropke they wanted to fight the Russians. And so, with that settled, it was ordered that the BFC must aim to create at least a single infantry platoon of 30 men. That was the initial goal, and it was decreed that no BFC member could be part of any action against British or Commonwealth forces. There were also a number of other concessions. They wouldn't be used for intelligence gathering, and compromises were made, including BFC members not having to get the SS blood tattoo, not having to swear an oath of loyalty to Hitler, and not being subject to German military law. They would soon receive pay equal to the German soldiers of their rank. The BFC was certainly a unique SS regiment, as seen with the aforementioned concessions. Even British military drill was retained, to further reinforce this image of the unit as unique, most likely to make it more appealing to British POWs, as they seemed a lot harder to recruit than some of the other European foreign legions. Along with this was their iconic issue field dress. The uniform for the BFC was requested, with 800 insignia ordered to be manufactured. In April 1944, the British Free Corps was issued its distinctive insignia. The Union flag shield patch was worn on the arm above a cuff title that read British Free Corps in Gothic text. The SS collar tabs were swapped out for the iconic 3 lions adjacent on the collar of the rank tab, as with standard SS uniforms. Soon, the men were also issued with paybooks and weapons, signifying the true formation of the British Free Corps and its identity. Soon the small number of BFC members went off to various camps throughout Germany and Austria where they had been interned previously to try and encourage more of a recruitment drive among the ranks. The idea failed, however, to produce the number of desired recruits, with only 6 new members. Interestingly, 2 of these recruits, John Lester and Eric Pleasance from the Channel Islands, gave a valuable insight into the motivation of some BFC members. They claimed they were mostly motivated by the opportunity to better food, alcohol, and access to women. Pleasance later admitted he was in it to have a good time, owing to the questionable loyalty of these men, not only to their own country, but now Nazi Germany. Furthermore, in August 1944, 4 more recruits joined the BFC. However, 3 of these recruits were blackmailed into enlisting. 2 of them were made to join as they had had relationships with local women. One of these men had made his girlfriend pregnant, which was an offence punishable by death. other man's relationship with a woman was discovered by the Gestapo. Undoubtedly, the addition of these men forced into joining the BFC only damaged the unit's morale and hindered any further recruiting efforts. It's clear here that not every member of the BFC and its already acute number of recruits was there out of a genuine loyalty for the Third Reich. Yet they had still betrayed their own country nevertheless. The British Free Corps had only grown to 27 members, despite the fact 30 was the supposed magic number it was supposed to have had. However, it was soon decided the unit was to be moved to a pioneer training school in Dresden to undergo combat engineer training in October 1944. Infantry and pioneer training followed the standard German pattern taught by German instructors. Here, the British Free Corps would receive instruction in clearing minefields, demolition, and other tasks required of combat engineers. The BFC was issued with rifles, steel helmets, camouflage uniforms, and gas masks, and given courses in the use of machine guns, flamethrowers, and explosives. Picket and sentry duty were assigned to the BFC, along with other theoretical training. D-Day and the subsequent Allied advance into German territory led many of the BFC to question their loyalty to the regime. Not all of them wanted to continue fighting for a lost cause. Some attempted to escape during this period, amidst the chaos of Germany's inevitable defeat. A group of men planned a coup on a train to the Eastern Front. Once on the train, all the men removed their BFC insignia. However, they were reported to the Gestapo by an innkeeper, putting an end to their planned escape. Likewise, during the Allied bombardment of Dresden on February 12, 1945, some of the members took advantage of this to escape, but were betrayed by the Gestapo again, by the girlfriend of one of the plotters. The entire British Free Corps was arrested in this case. However, they were later released and sent to Berlin, undoubtedly due to the war effort becoming even more hastily. Here, 3 men donned British Army uniforms in order to escape, disguised as prisoners of war. Clearly, the BFC as a whole were not motivated to participate in real combat, especially for a losing country. On the 8th of March 1945, remaining men in the British Free Corps were given a choice: to fight at the front or be sent to a disciplinary camp at Johanowitz. Unsurprisingly, given this ultimatum, all of them chose to fight. Douglas Marden, a South African POW who had joined in January, was left in charge of this ragtag unit of only 8 remaining men. The unit was sent to a training camp in New Mek, where the BFC men were given training in use of the Panzerfaust and other anti-tank strategies. They were also supposedly issued with the iconic Sturmgewehr 44 assault rifle and given training in its use. After all this time, the Germans would finally get some real combat use from the BFC. However, they would soon prove not up to the task. On the 1st of March 1945, a single truck loaded with the remaining British Free Corps travelled to the headquarters of the 3rd Gemeinschaft SS Panzer Corps. The HQ staff put the BFC in billets on the western edge of Stettin, awaiting their deployment. While waiting, the BFC came under some brief Soviet mortar and artillery fire, but no injuries were reported. On March 22, 1944, the small unit merged with the 11th SS Freiwilligen Panzergrenadier Division Nordland, but they would be placed with the Divisional Armoured Reconnaissance Battalion, 11th SS Panzeraufklärungsabteilung. Once there, the BFC were assigned to the 3rd Company, equipped with a single SD KFZ 251 half-track and a Schwimmenwagen, and were given shovels to repair trench lines within the company's perimeter. The BFC remained in the line for a month. However, enthusiasm for combat waned. Soon, it was decided after an inspection that the BFC had little fighting efficiency. They were deemed morally unstable, and it would be better to withdraw them from the front. Even the Germans didn't trust this foreign legion. Now, the BFC were issued with rations and travel orders to Templin for transfer, where they would join a transport company, arriving on April 16, 1945. They would continue to aid the war effort in various tasks far from real combat, later driving trucks, directing traffic, and assisting in the evacuations of civilians. The Russian offensive over the Oder River obliged the remaining members of the BFC to flee in a convoy towards Schwerin. It was clear that morale was low, and the end was in sight for the few who remained in the BFC. Reportedly, the Americans were 30 kilometers from Schwerin, so they changed into civilian clothing and proceeded to walk towards the American lines to eventually be captured as escaped POWs. This would become the end of the tiny British Free Corps. The reality is that this unit ultimately failed in achieving the goals set out by Amory and German High Command. At no time did it reach more than 27 men in strength, which was embarrassing, as the small number of 30 was set as the limit originally, a testament to the loyalty of British and Commonwealth troops. Those that did join were not necessarily dedicated fascists as intended. While there are of course many fascist sympathisers and anti-Bolsheviks within the ranks, some men were recruited for dubious reasons. Blackmail, torture, and access to alcohol and women to get away from POW life were among many of the listed reasons. Amory's dream of a dedicated British branch of the Waffen-SS would fail to ever come to fruition. As for the fate of these men, the majority got off surprisingly lightly. Larger players such as Amory were hung, while the rest were given minor prison sentences and often let out much earlier. In 1946, it was even learned that 3 former BFC members had escaped punishment. They were merely summoned to an MI5 office, given a slap on the wrist with a warning concerning their future interests. Such would be the fate of these men and a unit which would disappear into obscurity, sidelined by other foreign units of the Waffen-SS, many more successful in their nature. Thank you for watching this video on a more obscure part of Second World War history. If you enjoyed, please give it a like and subscribe. It would really help motivate me to make more content in the future. And if you have any ideas, questions or queries, leave them in the comments below. Again, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video on this channel.